Thanks, Chair. Tánaiste, my question is around the triple lock, and how does he envisage that? What type of operations would the Irish military forces be engaged in terms of being not allowed under the UN Charter?
Okay, Tánaiste?
Yeah. First of all, as I stated earlier in response to Deputy Howland and other questions, we are living in a new era in Europe and the world, in which Ireland also faces significant new security and defence challenges, and we must consider too how best to respond. And given the changing nature of international conflict and geopolitics, it's appropriate and necessary at this time to amend existing legislation with regard to overseas deployments. And this will ensure that our legislation is fully up to date, fit for purpose, and will thereby allow us to dispatch the defence forces overseas to respond to situations where the UN Security Council members are preventing agreement on a vital peacekeeping operation, or to support crisis management evacuation operations involving our citizens. In addition to modifying the triple lock, it is also intended to amend provisions relating to the deployment of defence forces personnel in non-combatant evacuation operations and other security duties overseas. This is particularly to support Irish citizens, and the changes proposed will allow us to respond to crisis situations with more agility and clarity. And I'm happy to provide the House, however, with some examples where the existing triple lock provision has created issues in terms of potentially restricting the deployment of members of the defence forces overseas. The most recent occurred in 2022, when the possibility of an UN Security Council veto emerged in relation to the renewal of UN authorisation for EUFOR Operation Althea in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where 5 members of the Defence Forces are currently deployed. Had this mandate extension been vetoed, we would have had to withdraw from the mission. At the time, using our membership of the UN Security Council, we successfully influenced the other members to renew the mandate. Had we been unsuccessful in our efforts, however, our contingent would have had to withdraw given the current provisions under the triple lock. In 2017, the Maritime Analysis Operations Centre, Narcotics, MAOCN for short, which is an international maritime intelligence centre supported by the European Union, requested a naval service ship to assist with maritime drug interdiction operations. Although Ireland is a strong supporter of the centre and was in fact one of the founding members, consideration could not be given to deploying a ship, given that there would be no UN mandate for such an operation. Another example occurred in 2015, when the European Union established a security mission in the Mediterranean known as Operation Sophia. The mission did not have a UN mandate until 2016, and as a result, Ireland could not participate until then. And the same concerns have since arisen as regards Operation Althea, and could indeed arise into the future, where a potential UN Security Council member veto will result in Ireland having to withdraw from the mission under current legislative provisions. And these are the kind of deployments where the current provisions have created problems for Ireland in terms of our contributions to international peace and security, and it is situations such as these that the legislative changes proposed are attempting to overcome. And there has been no new peace mission or peacekeeping mission sanctioned by the UN Security Council since 2014. It's important, however, that I again emphasise that any legislative proposals will remain fully consistent with the principles of the UN Charter and international law. The proposed changes are not about Ireland turning its back on UN peacekeeping. Ireland is and will remain fully committed to the UN. And the purpose of these modifications is to reinforce Ireland's ability to pursue an independent foreign policy by removing the power of UN Security Council members to veto our national sovereign decisions. Any modification will continue to require Government and Dáil approval for the dispatch of Defence Forces personnel to take part in peacekeeping and similar missions, and will do nothing to change Ireland's traditional policy and position on military neutrality, which is characterised by Ireland's non-participation in any military alliance.
I don't trivialise them situations where, the Irish Defence Forces have encountered, but there is a distinct narrative by your government that Irish neutrality is up for grabs. And you can shake your head all you want, but the rhetoric coming from this government and EU leaders is that we're almost like in a pre-war situation in Europe. And us on the opposition have been very, very concerned in terms of that rhetoric and in terms of the militarisation of Europe. And that's why we hold neutrality absolutely sacred, because we do not want to be drawn into any wars, imperialist wars that could take place on mainland Europe. And that's why we believe that the triple lock is important to keep and not to compromise. And you want to compromise the triple lock, and you want to say, I think it's actually a good term, putting it as a double lock. So that is concerning in terms of the overall strategy of neutrality in Ireland.
There has been no peacekeeping mission approved by the UN Security Council since 2014. Sorry, it hasn't. I said, no, you made the point that there was no obstacle since 2000. There's none been approved since 2014.
Sorry,
and
to reply.
I want to make the point, I mean, Deputy Kenny spoke about the militarisation of Europe, and he doesn't want to be involved in any imperial, we're not going to be involved in any imperial war. We need a dose of reality in this House. We're not a military power, and we're nowhere near a military power. This is about peacekeeping and the methodology by which we can participate in peacekeeping. At the moment, Russia can veto peacekeeping, participation by Ireland in the peacekeeping mission. There's a moral and ethical question here. Are we serious that we think a power like Russia, which, by the way, is the imperial power on the continent of Europe, it has currently invaded a sovereign country who wanted to live in a democracy and has visited the most appalling brutality in that country through the conduct of its military campaign. And some people in the House seem to be okay that a country like that and a power like that can veto our participation in peacekeeping. That's the reality. And we know what they've done with the Wagner Group all over the world and in Africa. And that's fine, it seems, Deputy Kenny. That seems to be fine. The European Union has no colonies. I don't see the European Union as an imperialist power. You may. And that's more as the false narratives that keep getting discussed in this debate. So we get into this unreal, surreal world where people talk about the militarisation of Europe, the militarisation of Ireland, as if somehow we're going to assume massive military powers and resources in the next year or two and we'll be out fighting everybody. That's not going to happen, Deputy. That is not in the world of reality at all. But where we have, I think, distinguished ourselves is in peacekeeping. And, you know, some in large operations like UNIFIL or ONDOF or Chad in times past, where we were essential in ensuring humanitarian aid getting through. One of the biggest struggles we had on the UN Security Council, and it's important that you take note, and you say, oh, nearly, that's important to observe. Because if every battle to maintain a humanitarian corridor, for example, to northern Syria, and Ireland was instrumental on the UN Security Council to keep that corridor open, which, yes, we did. No, but would you listen to this? I'm not talking, that's not, the triple lock doesn't apply here. It's the politics of the Security Council is the point I'm trying to enlighten members on. The politics wanted to close it down. The permanent members wanted to close it down. And that can happen at any time. My point being, the Security Council is, in my view, dysfunctional in terms of these issues. And we have to, there's no point in waiting until something terrible happens. Ireland incurred the wrath. I didn't interrupt you, Deputy, and I'm just making some clear points here. Ireland did not, for example, Ireland incurred the wrath of Ethiopia by strongly standing by a humanitarian response. Like, our international presence is humanitarian. It's peacekeeping. And please stop trying to portray what we're about here as some sort of erosion of our military neutrality or a sort of engagement in militarisation and imperial powers. That is so absurd. It needs to be called out now, Deputy. We need sane, rational debate about where we are in the world today. And I'm not going to tolerate attempts to undermine sane, rational debates.
Deputy.
And that's what I genuinely believe.
Deputy Kenny.
I agree with you that the UN Security Council is dysfunctional. You just look at what the United States' role in terms of Israel. Its conduct in the last 7 months, where 35,000 people have been killed, including 15,000 children. Think about that. Now, that's absolutely dysfunction. And America have played a completely detrimental role in terms of international relations. And they've undermined any sort of human solidarity in terms of the UN. And Ireland has played a very key role in terms of peacekeeping in the Middle East. But that has been slowly eroded, Tánaiste, throughout the last number of years in terms of the militarisation across the European complex. You just have to look at a European defence industrial strategy. Just look at that. I just ask anybody to have a look at that. And don't tell me that is a precursor to a European army across Europe.
We're just out of time, so a very, very quick response.
Again, I think the situation in Syria was not about peacekeeping, because we weren't involved in Syrian peacekeeping. It was during our membership of the UN Security Council where we gained very significant insight in respect of the behaviour of permanent members of the UN Security Council. And the bottom line is, the permanent members should not have a hold on Irish sovereignty. They should not be dictating whether or not we participate in a peacekeeping mission. Because there hasn't been a peacekeeping mission approved since 2014.
What ones have been blocked?
Hasn't been approved since. There's been none approved since 2014.
But what ones have been blocked?
The fundamental point.
What ones have been vetoed?
Okay, that's the end of that section. Can I just welcome